We already know how talking and conversation are so very important in the literacy development of young children. This is one of the critical roles of early childhood teachers, facilitating language skills and vocabulary development with their students. I've always learned a great deal by observing other teachers in their classroom meetings and circle times. There are many, many ways to get students talking and learning from each other as well as the teacher. I'll share some ideas with you, but there really is no limit to how to engage students in meaningful conversations, even when you have some students who seem reticent to jump into discussions. One powerful way to engage young students in meaningful conversation is to engage them in observations and data collecting. For example, observe the types of shoes children are wearing. Count how many are wearing sneakers, how many are wearing sandals, boots, or other types of footwear. Make hash marks on the board for each category and write sentences based on the data. For example, 10 students are wearing sneakers. 5 students are wearing sandals. 1 student is wearing boots. 1 student is wearing a pair of Crocs. Then invite students to further draw a conclusion about the shoes they are all wearing. For example, create a sentence that says, most students wear sneakers to school, or 5 out of 10 students are wearing sneakers today. Depending on the developmental level of your students, you can create additional and more sophisticated sentences. Invite students to read the sentences with you. Leave the sentences on the board so students can read them later in the day. And begin your class meeting or circle time the next day by reading the sentences again together before suggesting a different inquiry. Other suggestions for observations and data collecting might be, on a rainy day, observe what types of rain gear students brought to school: raincoats, hats, umbrellas, etc. Or, what was the last food item students ate? What is their favorite sport, game, or television show? What is their favorite color? The options are endless. And also note, you are teaching both literacy and math skills. Share something interesting about your own life. Teaching is a relationship. You don't have to be overly personal, but if your dog or cat does something funny, share it. These types of experiences make connections with the lives and experiences of your students. I remember one day I was sitting in front of my kindergarten students, crisscross applesauce, preparing to read a book, and I noticed I was wearing mismatched socks. One was brown and the other was black. Oh my! I showed my students my socks and we all laughed together. One student asked me, why did I wear different socks? I said, well, I think my bedroom was a little dark when I put them on, or maybe when I folded my socks and put them together, I was in a hurry. But I told them, you're just going to have to get used to my silly socks for the rest of the day. For several days, my students asked me about my socks, making sure I'd gotten it right. And I must admit that a couple of times later in the year, I purposefully mismatched my socks just for fun. And there were days when I was just a little tired in the morning because I'd stayed up late to read a great book. I shared this with my students, and of course, they wanted to know what book I was reading. Sometimes it was a mystery novel, Other times it was a favorite book by Marilyn Robinson or Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. I'd say a sentence or two about what I loved about the book so much that I couldn't put it down to go to sleep. It gave my students a peek into my life as a reader and, in the bargain, modeled what it meant to love reading. Give your children a peek into your life as a child. Maybe you could bring in your school picture from when you were their age. That's often eye opening for young children as they look from your face now to your face as a young child and they imagine what they'll look like as adults. Maybe you could invite them to create a picture of themselves as adults and as a class, create a gallery walk of their own school pictures next to their adult pictures. Talk about things that you and your students are curious about. I mean, this can be connected to current events that your children may have heard about at home, on the television, or while listening to adult conversations. For example, bad weather may be predicted for the coming season because of El Nino conditions. Or perhaps the cicadas are en route to your state. Maybe your town is planning to erect a statue of a local hero. Or there's a farmer's market opening up the next weekend. Share your curiosity and hatch a plan to learn more and bring the children along in the inquiry. How do you go about finding information? I mean, some children will suggest looking it up on the computer. Others might suggest simply asking someone at school or at home. This is how inquiries are investigated. And these are very important skills for young children. And all the while, your students are talking. Talk about things that interest children that are sometimes left unexplored. Children are sometimes fascinated by things we often take for granted. I remember visiting a toddler class in a local preschool many years ago. At 10 o'clock in the morning, a swarm of 2-year-old toddlers ran over to a large window facing the parking lot. Of course, I was intrigued and followed. They stood patiently for 2 minutes, staring out the window, with some children jockeying for a better position. As if on cue, a large truck pulled up in front of a dumpster that sat a few feet from the window. I must admit that I found the enterprise to be quite interesting too. I'd never thought much about dumpster emptying, but it was clear that what we were all watching was a marvel of engineering. I've learned that there are many, many videos and books about construction, front end loaders, trucks, and machinery, and that children are often delighted with the videos and books. So consider what's going on in the neighborhood around your school. Are there construction projects, tree trimming activities, landscapers working, or any number of other everyday life activities that are worth sharing with your children? Consider taking your students on a walk to stand a safe distance away to watch the workers and the tools they use to complete their work. What an amazing opportunity for children upon returning to the classroom to talk about what they observed and draw pictures and construct a short story about the experience. And if possible, it would be amazing if the children could create a mini construction project in the classroom or on the playground. This is a perfect opportunity for the teacher to utilize a strategy called the language experience approach. After an experience, for example, students watching a landscaper plant flowers, students dictate sentences about what they observed while the teacher writes their sentences on a chart paper, the board, or on a computer screen, and then participate in a shared or choral reading of the story that is created. There is no better way to get students talking than to engage them in conversations about their own work. I'm a huge fan of the Reggio Emilia approach to teaching young children, in which art is acknowledged as one of the many languages of children. Carefully and considerately designed art projects give young children an opportunity to express themselves in creative ways. Perhaps more importantly, art provides children with something to talk about as they discuss the process as well as the product of their artistic endeavors. I encourage teachers to explore the ideas that have been generated by those who employ a Reggio Emilia approach in their classrooms. For me, there is much promise in this approach in creating a truly child centered and an amazingly appealing classroom environment. Talking, and lots of it, represent the building blocks of literacy development. As the saying goes, if I say it, I can write it. And if I write it, I can read it.